Let's hope you feel the same at the end. It wasn't my intention for you to not be able to read this, but actually I quite like the way that's come out.
Yes.
So the quote is, "We are merely trees of possibilities," which is a quote from my favourite rock star, who is Mark Bolan. Yeah, couldn't start without quoting that. If you take the word merely out, "we are trees of possibilities," I just think that's a great concept. And there's a thing, because I work in the circles of training people, and there's a thing that's now known as growth mindset. And that's the kind of the in thing at the moment, is getting people to that point where they have a real full growth mindset, which is exactly what you were talking about just then, of continual learning and being responsible for your own learning. And I was working with a company at the beginning of this week, which is very innovative. And the CEO's strapline, I didn't actually meet him, but he's described as a bit of a Mick Jagger kind of character. And his strapline is "innovate or die." And he is, with what they're doing, he is literally talking about that if we don't innovate enough, if we don't learn enough, you know, the human race literally are in a situation where we have the possibility we can die out. Possibilities can come and go. So he's pretty serious about that. And they actually create these radiators that are very carbon neutral, and they're the most sort of innovative radiators you could come across. And they give out hot air and cool air. And I can tell you they're really effective. I was working in a very large room. There was only one of these radiators. And if they put the heat on, you got heat straight away. And if you put the cold air on, you got cold air straight away. And they reckon... Yeah, no. I just thought it's great, you know. They're on net zero, according to their own research. They're on net zero already. They've just moved into a new factory, and they reckon that when they analyse it next year, they'll be even better than that. So I'm going to just go from some notes for the moment, because I decided I would like to do this in kind of a fit of enthusiasm from Mike's talk last time, which I thought was really good. Found it really interesting. I thought, okay, I'm going to try and do something similar. And then there's a lot has been happening to me in the last 2 weeks, and this has gone through various guises. I could go on forever. I wasn't told how long to talk for, and Dave came to me, asked, "How long are you going to talk for?" And I could have said 3 hours. But I'm going to try and truncate this down to half an hour. But to put it into context, as I said, I run training courses. I generally teach people how to do things like this, public speaking. I also teach general communication skills. Sometimes I'm getting people ready for media interviews and things like that. And so I teach such marvelous things like how many words we speak in a minute. Any ideas? Go on, take a guess.
20.
20? Any other offers?
In a minute.
In a minute.
Probably about 200.
200? Right, one more offer, 50, all right. It's on average 150 words per minute, all right. So if I talk to you for the next 20 minutes, I will be giving something in the region of 3,000 words. If I talk for half an hour, which I probably will, I'm going to hit something like 4,500 to 5,000 words. You get the idea. It's a lot of information. So part of what I'm teaching is how can you make sure you get your messages across within all the amount of information that you might be passing across. If you break down separate communication skills, so things like choice of wording, tone of voice, eye contact, body language, all that type of thing, how many separate communication skills do you think there are? A dozen? Right. Somebody researched this and came up with 110 separate communication skills. Yeah. They also came up with what they called 60 micro skills, which is where you're talking virtually, virtual meetings, things like that, where of course a lot of the natural face-to-face communication skills disappear. If somebody can remind me at the back end of this, I will tell you how to turn one phrase and give it 6 different meanings. All right, but I might need reminding of that. I'll try and come back to that. So this week I have worked for that company that were based in Malvern. So I was up in Herefordshire for 2 days. Then I worked in London for an advertising agency teaching business writing, which is kind of ironic because I'm dyslexic. So I always pinch myself that I'm actually teaching business writing. And then on Thursday, I was doing a course for Lidl at their head office, which was titled Effective Interaction. Nothing to do with customers, by the way. So if you've had bad service at Lidl, it's nothing to do with me. I'm talking to the managers there. And then the other thing that happened the previous week, just to put all of this into context, is that my son from a previous marriage, he's now 32 years old, and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Got sections, been in hospital, came out of hospital and disappeared. And so I haven't actually seen him for 3 years. And week before this week, he turned up in Yateley. And so that was great. It was fabulous to see him, of course, but in the event of 4 meetings that I had with him, it turned out that nothing has changed, and he has spent the last 17 months living on the streets in London. In fact, he was sleeping down the road while he was here because I wasn't going to be able to take him in anyway, but there was no way he would have done that. He doesn't want, I don't know why he came, because he doesn't want any help whatsoever. And cutting a long story short, I ended up having to take him to Fleet Station, put him on the train, send him back to London. On his request, I hasten to add. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to stay here any longer. He'd found it hard enough, I think, as it was. And then there was an incident outside St. Peter's Church here, outside Discoveries, where a lady had tried to interact with him. He'd frightened her so much that they called out the police. And so that was his decision, right? I don't want to be here anymore. So that was pretty hard. And of course, it kind of gives you a bit of context as to what I'm going to talk to you about. So I'm going to take you through some of my life story, what has helped me to get through life and make the most of the possibilities that have come my way. And I can tell you that nobody that I was working with this week would have had any clue of what I was having to deal with the week before. And the reason why that is because I can act. I know that we all do that. All of us have times where we hide what's going on in our lives, and maybe at work we don't want to reveal some things that are going on. We're all capable of doing that. I'm possibly better than the majority of people at doing that, partly because that's my job. I have to come across like know what I'm doing, know what I'm talking about, etc., etc. You've got to do that, otherwise you're not going to survive. So just to give you a little example of this. Right, again. There we go. Right, just trying to lay on a little tree on top of this. A tree, if you think about it, the way that it survives is that it grows its branches, it grows its leaves, it feeds off the air. Fortunately for us, takes in the carbon out of the air, and it puts down its roots. And the more that it does that, the more it has the possibilities to survive. And we, as we all know, it doesn't guarantee their survival. Trees can die, but doing all of that certainly helps them to cope with all the different things, the storms, the rain, etc., and helps them to survive in that sense. And that, to me, I think when I look back on my life, I think a lot of my life has been about that. It's been about spreading out my branches, putting down the roots, and that's what's helped me to get through to a large extent, which I will tell you about. So a bit of a then and now photograph here. This was taken just before COVID, actually, when I went to see this particular show. And that's me at the age of 13 years old, doing a show in that particular theatre as a child actor. And so here, 40 odd years later, was the first time that I'd actually stepped foot back into that theatre. So that was really nice to do. So what got me to that point is that, well, first of all, I'll backtrack actually for a moment. My mum described me as not the most confident boy ever. And I think that's absolutely right. I found that I went to what they called then a nursery school, day school or something like that now, but it was nursery school then in Windsor. And I really hated it. I can still, one of my early childhood memories is this sort of gut-wrenching feeling of, oh, I really don't want to do this. And actually I was like that throughout pretty much most of my school days. Up until 13 years old, I was like that, hated school, felt like a fish out of water, just couldn't deal with that. One of those reasons might have been also terrible haircuts. So apparently when we lived in Chiswick, and before that black and white photograph was taken, and in Chiswick apparently my mum would take me to Harrods for a haircut. It must have cost a bit, but I'm assuming they did pretty good haircuts. And then when we moved to Ascot, in the black and white photo there, my mum decides she's going to cut my hair herself. Good grief, what was she thinking of? And then several years later, this was actually taken, we'd moved to Little Sandhurst, and that was taken at Uplands Primary School, if anyone knows that. And clearly the hair cutting has not got any better. At Uplands Primary School, there was a teacher called Mrs. Wright. Right by name, right by nature. Because she did two really good things for me. She, first of all, diagnosed me as dyslexic in an unofficial teacher capacity. And then, as best they could in 1969, I was officially diagnosed with dyslexia, as best they can. I'm sure it's a lot more thorough now. And the other thing that Mrs. Wright did was that she would actually hold auditions for the annual school plays. And 3 years in a row, I got the lead part in the school plays. So one time she went to my parents and said, you really should consider sending your son to stage school. Now, bless her, she's probably thinking he's never going to be academic. He's never going to get anywhere normal school, so best place is stage school. And my parents looked into that, decided, no, that's probably not the best thing because the education was notoriously bad in those days at a stage school. So they didn't do that, but they did put me on a child's theatrical agency. And after doing a few little things, few kind of modelling jobs and things like that, I then went for an audition for a stage show in the West End of London, and I got it. And the reason I wanted to be an actor was because of this guy here. Is anyone old enough to remember me from Uncle? Yelio Kiraki, that's right. So, and you can see the similarities, can't you? So, yeah, that's right. If he can do that, I can do that. So, yeah, the first audition I go for that's like a big part was this. And this was, as you can see, controversial comedy. It was a comedy about Catholics and the pill, which in 1970 was a very controversial subject. It was kind of splitting the Catholic Church apart, I think, at the time. And so not only was I in this West End show, but I was also under some kind of media attention. That's the only clipping I've got. I know there were lots of others that my parents didn't allow me to see or read because they were actually quite condescending, or questions asked about whether it was right for a 10-year-old boy to be in a play of that nature. And all I can say is I learnt quite a lot at the age of 10. I'm going to name drop like mad. You'll have to forgive me for this. So there's me. Prunella Scales, if you've ever watched 40 Towers, Basil Fawlty's wife. Stephen Moore, if you remember Harry Enfield's character of Kevin. Yeah. It's not fair. And Stephen Moore played Kevin's father in those sketches. And there was also an actress, Angharad Rees, who, if you remember, Poldark, the early 70s version of Poldark. So there's Angharad Rees, me, and a boy on that, the other side there is Adrian Hall, who is the boy in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Now, if you were ever to watch that film, you would think butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. He actually bullied me, and at one time had my head down the toilet on one particular occasion. So yeah, there was some difficulties during that show, but Angharad Rees was lovely. I developed a huge crush on Angharad Rees. And in fact, one evening I was late on stage because I was so busy watching Angharad Rees cuddling another actor. I ended up like about a minute late on stage, and Prunella Scales and Stephen Moore had to ad-lib, literally, West End audience, and they're waiting for me to get on stage. And then the next show that I did was a musical version of Tom Brown's School Days. So see me there again, terrible haircut. This is Keith Chegwin. Yeah, Cheggers plays pop, multicoloured swap shop, the annoying guy on breakfast TV. Over here, this guy here, the tall one, I remember him talking about how he wanted to be a pop star and everyone laughed at him. And his name is Simon Le Bon. So if you know Duran Duran, yeah, that was him. So I guess he had the last laugh. And then, of course, we can think of people at different stages in our life who kind of have influence and change our lives to a degree. So in the same show as the dark-haired guy there, Richard Willis, he's still an actor now, but became a great friend of mine and introduced me to music. So he would come to the show armed with a guitar, taught me how to play House of the Rising Sun, and also taught me how to write music, because he was already doing that. At the age of 14, he was already writing music. And I thought, yeah, that's cool. I want to do that. So I started writing music. We would write music together. And between him and myself and his brother, Robin, we kind of formulated a band, not a band that went out and played or did gigs, but we were songwriting all the time. We were putting our music onto cassette tapes, which is all you had at the time. And for me, that was my therapy. Actually, if I look back on it, writing music, you offload. It really is a good sort of counselling service in itself. So, get a girlfriend, you write about the girlfriend. Lose a girlfriend, you write about losing the girlfriend. Various other things that are going on in your life. So that was the start of music becoming a very important aspect of my life. And then, again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Went to stage school. At the age of 13, my parents gave in, sent me to stage school. And my career starts to progress. So I did other stage shows. One of them was Peter Pan with Maggie Smith. Have we got any Harry Potter fans here? Yeah. So Maggie Smith played Peter Pan. And at the age of, I'm guessing she was about 40. And she was just amazing at playing a young boy. This wasn't a pantomime. This was a proper serious version of the J.M. Barrie story. And playing a boy, very, very convincing. And then got into television, so I'm 16 years old when I did this, my first major television role. And later on got another one. This is from a program called A Bunch of Fives. You'll have heard of Grange Hill. So A Bunch of Fives was on ITV. The BBC then started up Grange Hill, really pinching the idea. And unfortunately, Grange Hill took over. I was promised that I would be in the second series of A Bunch of Fives. And then the director was sacked, the producer was sacked, and they couldn't fulfill the promise. And that was a big letdown for me, because this was a role that was my perfect role. I was acting in it, and I was also playing the lead singer in a band. And at the age of 17, got a bit of fan mail, and if I went out, I'd sign a few autographs. So, yeah, if there'd been a second series that I was in, then who knows where that would have gone, but it didn't. Again, cutting a long story short, this is Bugsy Malone. Not the biggest thing for me because I didn't do very much in it, but it happens to be a well-known film, and that's me there. That's me there. This girl here behind me is called Lisa Vanderpump. There's a program you might have seen called Vanderpump Rules, and it's about her as a multi-millionairess. She went on to do a lot of modelling. If you remember the band ABC, she appeared in all their videos for quite a while. And I guess, I don't know, dated somebody well-known. became a millionairess. It's amazing what happens in people's lives, isn't it? And then, this was, for me, one of the best things that I did. This was working with a theatre company where we were paid for by the government. It was a government project, and we were asked to do what was known as theatre and education. So we would go out to schools in the Midlands area, and we would have to write our own plays that needed to link into the curriculum of the day. So we were doing all of that. We were devising these plays and performing them to all different age groups and going around all the schools around the Midlands. And then we also did a thing called weekly rep, where you do one play 1 week, and then you're going to be performing another play the following week. So you're literally working from 10 in the morning till 10 at night, because you're rehearsing during the day and you're performing in the evening. Really hard work. It's not something that I could do now. And for a time, because of that particular show, as if you're the photographs here, we became quite well known, certainly in the Midlands area. We were in the local papers just about every week and everywhere we went. And so you can see, children turning up to see us. This is a photograph taken in a shopping centre in Redditch. We were running the show, as it were. A lot of people were there to see Father Christmas come down from the ceiling, to be honest. But probably the biggest audience I've ever had, there was about 10,000 people apparently, according to what was written in the papers. So all of that was great. And things that I learnt, I would say, this is signifying how our lives go up and down. So an actor's life definitely goes up and down. And I would say that every actor develops resilience, and certainly I had to do that. So I had gone from my unconfident childhood to having to cope with basically being made redundant regularly. Because that's what happens with an actor. And often they know that in advance, that you're going to do a job and it's only going to last a day, or it's only going to last a week, or it's only going to last several months, and you know that. But it's the feeling at the end of it is basically like being redundant. And in the case of the one that was the government project, we were hoping it would carry on, but after 1 year, the government decided they weren't going to refinance it, and so that died a death. And I really enjoyed that. So the feeling after that was pretty much a very big come down. I also learnt about teamwork, I would say. Any of you work in a team at work or manage a team? Yeah? All right. If you want a good template for teamwork, it's a theatre company. So if you think about it, a theatre company, everyone plays their role. They have to play it to the letter, to a script, of course, particularly if it's a professional production. You have to be at the theatre on time, otherwise there's problems. You have to get yourself on stage on time, or there's problems. You have to deliver your lines on time, on cue as it were, in front of your customers, your audience, who are giving you immediate feedback as to whether they like what you're doing or not. In addition to the actors, you've got the backstage crew, and they have to provide everything on time. You've got the people doing the lighting has to work in exactly the right way. People doing the sound, front of house staff, even people in the bar who've got to make sure the drinks are ready on time for the interval. And you have to finish on time, because you've got a paid audience who are not going to thank you for running over, particularly if they've got taxis waiting outside or car parking to pay and things like that. So, it's a really good template of an effective team. And work ethic, I would say, doing the weekly rep, one play each week, you've got to have a really good work ethic that I would say has stood me in good stead for the rest of my life.
What's a weekly rep?
It's a play each week.
Right.
It's weekly repertory, they call it.
Right.
Yes, it's the official title. So that closes, and suddenly I have nothing. I'd reached an age where I could no longer play a teenager. So I was 21, couldn't play a teenager anymore. Didn't seem to have the face to be able to play an adult either. And suddenly there's nothing. I went for months on end without any work. And so somewhere in my mind, I'm thinking, I might have to spread out my branches here. I might have to think of other things that I can do in between my acting work, because by that time I'm in a flat and I've got rent to pay and so forth. So out of that came an idea, which turned into a business called On Your Bike. And that came into being because some people kind of took pity on me. Some people that ran a company that made music for radio and TV. And they were paying motorbike couriers money to take something literally down the road. And so they said to me, yeah, if you need something to do, come in. Every time we need something delivering, we'll get you to do it. And we'll introduce you to a few other people that we think might want to use you as well. So I did that, and so I got a bit of pocket money coming in, and then I got a pantomime, and I had to go off doing that. And so I invited my friend Robin, the guy that I wrote music with, to come and take over while I was away. And one of the reasons I invited him to do that is because he had gone through a really bad time and actually took an overdose, took some sleeping pills. And when he was recovering from that, that's when this came up. And I said, look, why don't you do that? That was my idea, was to try and give him something to do. And so we did that, and it built up. You can see an article there. And literally within about 3 months, we'd taken on 5 riders, and we'd got bicycles, because by that time we're doing it together and we need to build up the business. And about 6 months later, it turned into about 30 riders, and a year later it was 60 riders. And which was great, but it wasn't what I really wanted to do. So Robin came up with this idea that we will keep the business, but we'll also start up a separate business where we'll promote our music, because that's what we'd always wanted to do. So his idea was, I'll focus on that. He'll focus on keeping the business going. And I would take a salary from On Your Bike to be able to do that. And so that seemed like a great idea to me at the time. I had some moderate success at it in that I did some recordings. One was with a guy called Herbie Flowers, that he's a session bass player. He did if anyone's heard Walk on the Wild Side, Lou Reed, he does a famous bass line in that. He'd worked with David Bowie and toured America with David Bowie and various people. So I did some recordings with him at EMI, which EMI then rejected. Then I also did some recordings with a guy who wrote the song I Love Rock and Roll, which is the Joan Jett hit. And he became my producer for a bit. On the back end of that, I got what they call a publishing contract with a recording studio in Mayfair. That was to write music, partly that I would sing myself and partly that would be offered for other people. And that had a bit of moderate success, but no big hits out of it. And then, cutting a long story short, eventually I got offered a contract with a record label based in Australia. And I was signed up to do 2 albums and 4 singles, started to do what they call the demo tracks for the album. And then the record company decided the partners were going to split up. And therefore I needed to wait until they sorted all that out. And it just came to nothing. Anyway, so, moderate success, but not really anything that I'd have hoped for. Publicity shot me as a rock star. There we go. With it, yeah. All right. And again, cutting a very long story short, you're going to recognise some people here. So with nothing better to do, and I decided it was fair for me to opt out of On Your Bike, because what I was doing wasn't really getting anywhere. I had a meeting with Robin. It just so happened at that point in time, the company was in difficulties, and so it was all agreed I would opt out. But this band appears, so you'll recognise Mr. McWilliam there, Mr. Wilden there, Ken's wife, Karen Wilden there, me there, and John Dival doing our sound all the time. And for a 3-year period, as what could best be described as a Christian band, we went around and played in churches and various other places over a 3-year period. And I like to think we were kind of innovative. At the time, Christian music was fairly staid and old-fashioned and certainly not very poppy. There were certainly other bands at the same time as us that I would say were doing the same thing, but we were kind of in with a new thing, I would say. So I'm quite proud of that. And we also led at St. Peter's Church what was known as a youth celebration. And I say we led it, we were the resident band quite regularly. And when that got to its largest, there was actually 150. You were talking about young people, youth. We had 150 on one particular occasion at its largest coming to that event. So it was pretty good. And then again, I'm skipping a lot out here. I'm going through the glossy stuff. All right, this is the end part of the glossy stuff. So working as a trainer, I decided something like 35 years ago that I would be a freelance trainer. And I've never looked back since. So that's me working at Nikon. Just a few examples of some of the companies that I've worked with as I've been working freelance. And I really just pinch myself at times of like, how on earth did I get to this point? And again, just to sort of give you an idea, again, this is a snapshot of the type of businesses and industries that I've worked with over a good 35 years. And, I pinch myself like I was doing last week. I was teaching business writing and I'm dyslexic. And one example is I spent 4 years or so working with what's called the International Maritime Organization, which is part of the United Nations. And I'm teaching 2 things. I teach public speaking there and media interviews. And I'm dealing with people who are coming on my training courses are people that are dealing with partner countries. They're trying to get funding from countries who are going to sign up to treaties. They're dealing with diplomats, they're dealing with politicians, and they're listening to me. And I'm thinking, well, if I look back, I have no qualifications. I came out of school, stage school, with very bad results from my what was known then as O levels. So I only have experience to back me up. And here I am. I'm often going, I just don't know how I've managed to get here. However, there are downsides. As anyone that has ever been self-employed or is self-employed, there are downsides. There's lots of ups and downs because as a self-employed person, your personal life and your working life tend to sort of merge together a lot. There is that phrase, work-life balance. When you're self-employed, there is no work-life balance. It's all part of your life, really. And so I've been through 3 recessions and I've lost work at times. And if I'm not working, I'm not earning. So that's been very tricky at times. About 10 years ago, I discovered I had tinnitus. Well, I discovered it. It was obvious. So I have ringing in my ears all the time. We all get that occasionally, but with me, one time it started and it didn't stop. There's possibly 2 reasons for that. One is that I've played in bands with loud drummers. I did a film at one time where I had to get blown up and they put the explosive in the ground, fill it up with dirt and leaves and so forth. And then in the film, somebody throws a hand grenade at me. And I was ready to act, but I did not need to act. The explosive went off and it blew me backwards. And extreme ringing in the ears afterwards. Eventually that, over a course of a day or a couple of days, that did disappear. But apparently that's one of the things, a shock, for instance, can result in tinnitus. So I have that to contend with. I then 5 years ago found out that I had diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And it's, all I can say, it's a pain. You've got to cut down on all sugar intake. So I can't eat cake, or not much of it anyway. And you're fairly restricted with what you eat. And I have to be careful because the worst part of diabetes is that you can, you know, faint, you can go into a coma. Oh, here I go. But it's a pain. Yeah. Right, dementia. My mum got dementia, so I'm having to cope with that. Then once she was in a home, and she actually died at the beginning of COVID, I couldn't even go and see her because we were in the first lockdown. So she died and I couldn't see her. Just as that is happening, my dad, then clearly dementia is creeping up on him as well. So I've gone through about, I don't know, 5-6 years of dealing with them. And trying to keep my own work and my own business going at the same time, you know, and not let those cross over. So that's been difficult. Better now because he is in a care home now and well looked after. Then, of course, we get COVID, lost all my work for a while during COVID. I actually liked lockdown. I liked no traffic, being in the garden for a nice summer. That was actually quite good, but obviously lack of business, not so good. The fortunate thing for me actually is that as training over the internet, of course, started to take off, I was actually able to do that because I'm used to television, I'm used to radio, things like that. So my work actually started to pick up pretty quickly because I'm one of the trainers that could actually do that and cope with that. And then mental illness. So there's my son. And so my son, again, this is very brief overview, but excuse me, spent 10 months with his mum. I actually had to, at the beginning of the first lockdown, I had to go and get him from where he was living in Nottingham because there's already major problems occurring and police had been called out on a couple of occasions. And so I went and picked him up. I actually drove all the way up to Nottingham with my car divided off into two. I put cling film dividing the front and the back of the car, rather like a taxi with a glass screen. And picked him up, took him to Ilfracombe in Devon, drove back here all in one day. Nobody on the streets. I broke the law, of course. Nobody on the streets. Didn't even see a police car. I was fully expecting to get arrested, but nothing, absolutely nothing. So there was that mental illness, and he spent 10 months with her until she couldn't cope with him anymore. He came up here, he made himself homeless, he was out on the streets of Camberley. Awful, worst time of my life ever. And excuse me, not only that, but Robin, who, by the way, ran on your bike for another 6 years after I left it and sold it for 1.5 million. Of which I never saw a penny. So our friendship sort of dissipated for a while. And then, you know, luckily it sort of reformed itself. And I'm glad about that because during COVID, he starts to get mental health problems. And again, there's a few suicide attempts. It seems to be in his genes. And eventually he succeeds. So I'm losing a friend from when I'm 13 years old, somebody I pretty much considered a brother, actually. So there's all of that, and yeah, there's the suicide. So that's Robin, the younger me, the older, three of us there together. So that was pretty hard. So I end up for actually the second time going into counselling. I had to do that once before. And I put PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because it was the only way that I felt I could describe it. You know, I went to the counsellor and I said, this is how it feels. You know, I've not been in a war. I've not had to cope with death. I've not seen burnt bodies or whatever, but it feels like PTSD. And, you know, she, at the end of the first session, she's saying, yep, you know, it's fine for you to call it that. That's kind of what it is, actually. And so I go through 3 counselling sessions, and all I can say is, for me, talking really helps. You know, the more I talk about something, slowly but surely, the better I feel. I'm never, like Mike said in his last talk, I'm never going to be better. My son is on my mind all the time. my thinking of how Robin committed suicide. And I'm going to use the word committed suicide. I know Jeff didn't like that. Jeff, the guy that spoke at the last men's weekend. But he did. He committed himself to an act that has so many consequences, and the ripple effects on everyone that tried to help him and his family and so on just is ongoing. So it's something people consciously or subconsciously, it's something you commit to. You've got to see it through, and that's what he did. So anyway, that gets me through. So what have I learned? What have I learned from all of this that I think might be useful for you? Partly for yourself and partly if you're ever talking to somebody else that might need some help. So one is focus on what you've got. That's what I have had to do. It's like every time I've got the negative thoughts going through my mind, and I have loads of triggers because everywhere I go around Yateley, I've got memories, literally everywhere I go, and each of those is a trigger. So every time that happens, I have to remind myself, focus on what you have got. I've got a wife and 22 years of marriage there, and I've had a lot of failures before that I'm not going to go into. Some people who know me know what I'm talking about. But I have that, and I have children about to go off to university. I've got a lot to be thankful for, and I have to keep reminding myself of that. You might need to do the same thing. Be aware of where you are at any time. There's a thing called emotional intelligence that you might have come across. Part of emotional intelligence is being aware of how you are feeling on any one day, because if you can be aware of that, then you can start to do something about it. And if you've got any strategies, then of course you can start to bring in those strategies where you need them. If you're not aware of it, then it just builds up until you get to a point, like Mike was saying, it builds up until before you realize it, you crashed. So you need to be aware and remain aware. And bring back the good. So I learnt this some years ago, and I actually sometimes teach the same thing. So what you do, I'm just going to describe this verbally, is you do a simple graph. So the bottom line is a timeline of whatever you want it to be. The timeline could be years, each year upon year, or it could be the different job roles that you've done, or just different sort of major parts of your life. It's entirely up to you, but you create this timeline. And then the other axis, of course, is a 0 to 10 axis. And you draw a line throughout your timeline that will go up and down. And that line is to do with your happiness or your sense of well-being, which of course will end up going up and down, high or low. And then you draw another line, which is to do with how productive you are or what kind of sense of achievement you feel you've had. So it doesn't have to be all work-related. It's entirely up to you. But you do that other line, right? Where those two lines meet at their highest levels, that's where you've hit an element in your life that was good. And if you've lost any of those elements, you need to bring them back again. It's not that you try and relive it as such, but if you've lost any elements, then you need to bring it back. So I did that. When I first learnt about this thing and I tried it out for myself, what I then went and did was bought myself a laptop and recording software so that I could, in hotel rooms when I got nothing better to do, I could be creating music, because I'd lost that. And now I've recently rejoined a band, and the thing I like about it is that it's not that serious. We will go out and gig at some point, but it's more like the rehearsals are fun. So let's just have a bit of fun with it. So I like that. And that, again, brings back the good part of my life, which I haven't done for many years now.
Two more questions. So
yes.
What was the timeline? What were the dimensions of the happiness against?
The happiness is literally against a 0 to 10, 10 being very happy. Yeah. And then the bottom timeline is whatever you choose it to be. So it could be numbers of years or moments in time in your life, anything you choose it to be. Right. Yeah, give it a try. There's a few things that I'll try and send through WhatsApp to you, and I'll send through a copy of that as well. So just to finish off, a few things that, who knows, some of you might find useful at work. I like this one. Your manager influences your mental health more than your therapist. So you could weigh up your own line managers against this, see how they're doing. If you are a line manager or a leader of a team, weigh yourself up against that, because who knows, you might be doing something that affects the mental health of people that you work with. Another one here, high-performing teams. I talked about theatre company being a good example of teamwork, but again, I'll send this to you through WhatsApp in case it's useful to you. You can weigh up your team against that. And then this one about your own well-being, energy zones and stuff. All right, so as I say, I'll send all of those to you through WhatsApp in case it's of any use. So we are merely trees of possibilities. There's a reminder there for you. What was it I asked you to remind me of earlier?
6 things you were going to talk about.
6 meanings out of one sentence. Okay, all right. Yeah. So the sentence I'm going to give you is, I didn't say the boy stole the butter. So if I said to you, I didn't say the boy stole the butter, that would mean somebody else said it, but not me. If I said I didn't say the boy stole the butter, that would mean I thought it maybe, but I didn't say it out loud. I didn't say the boy stole the butter. That would mean somebody else stole it. I didn't say the boy stole the butter. He was maybe given it. I didn't say the boy stole the butter. He stole something else. So you get the idea. Sometimes the way that you pace it, pause it, emphasize it can make a very big difference to how the message comes across. Right? Any questions at all?